Thank you, Burhan, and thank you for all of you who have gathered here tonight, and for those of you who have helped gather everyone here. I'm grateful to you because I have a vision for the state of Ohio, which is a vision of a state that is welcoming and inclusive and diverse and tolerant, and that's what we all, I think, want to see. But it matters who the leadership is in the state, whether they embrace that notion or whether they don't. Let me give you a couple stories about what I see for the future of Ohio. Let me talk about when I was the Franklin County Treasurer, and I began to realize that we had this growing and increasingly large Somali community in Franklin County. And I wanted us to reach out to the community and find a way to build bridges and build relations and talk to one another and understand one another. So one of the things I began to do was we agreed to take our office out on the road, as we were doing everywhere else in the community, but to do the same with the Somali community and come to mosque, as we did, I think, once a month on Friday for several years. And I remember vividly, because at first, and then I got used to it, we would bring our people and we would get there as people were coming into mosque, and we would share information with them about whatever we had to share about financial literacy or property taxes or different issues about money. And then we would sit there while everybody left their shoes, and everybody would go in to prayer, and we would be there with several hundred shoes. That would be our accompaniment for the next hour. And then people would come out again and be reunited with their shoes, and we would talk some more and share more information, and then go on our way. But that was, to me, sitting there with those shoes was, to me, an expression of respect for the community and how the community respects its worship. And it was, to me, a sign of these are the kinds of bridges we can build for one another. I want to tell you another story about Hamza, who's in this room. When my son went to high school just a few years ago, and he was a freshman at the high school, and he wanted to be in the European history class, which was something he was excited about. And I think everybody else in that class, if I'm remembering right, was a junior or a senior, and my son was a freshman, and he was rather small for his age. So I think he stuck out like a sore thumb, and he was shy. And the first day he was in class, he was nervous, and he felt sort of left out because he didn't know any of the other kids. And there was one young man, I get a little choked up when I tell the stories, one young man who came over and sat down with my son and became his friend and became his partner in that class, and that was Hamza. And Hamza was a very popular student. Hamza was a very popular student. He's a soccer player. Now he's standing still here tonight, but he didn't stand still much on the soccer field. And because he was popular, my son was accepted. And that is the Ohio that I see for us, is helping one another, building bridges across communities, and recognizing our essential common core humanity. And that's what I want to see in this state. And not everybody accepts that vision for the state of Ohio. If you saw the advertising in the Republican primary this year for governor, all about against immigration and against having anybody new in this state, even though everybody pretty much in the state was new at one time or another, if you go back in the generations, that was, to me, a sign of what we don't want in Ohio. Again, I want to see a state that is welcoming, diverse, inclusive, and tolerant. And let me say a word about Ismail, who was the, as I understand it, the first Somali in Central Ohio to run for office this year. It takes a while, sometimes, doesn't it, Ismail, to break down those walls. And you have to be someone who is courageous and somebody who is willing to put yourself forward. And I respect that very much, and I admire that. And we need more of that here in Ohio. And I'm familiar with the Somali community in Minneapolis. When I was the head of the Consumer Bureau in Washington, D.C., it seemed like I went to Minnesota a lot. I'm not entirely sure why I went there so much. We had a fellow who was working with us on our advisory board who was a law professor at the University of Minnesota Law School, And we had another person who was a credit union person who was from there. Just seemed we ended up there a fair amount. And to see the community there and how they had pushed forward into political life. And there were elected officials from the Somali community, and they were making the progress that I want to see this community make in Ohio as well, was a good sign for where we can go as in the United States, if we have the right vision and the right attitude and the right leaders who embrace that vision. And people like Ismail who are talented, we can't afford to leave them out of Ohio. We need to embrace everyone's talents in this state. We need to open up opportunity to everyone. And I will tell a story about what I remember from the campaign when President Obama was elected in 2008. You know, he was trying to break down a very serious barrier in American politics. To try to elect the first African-American president of the United States was an undertaking. You'll remember on election night, people were weeping, and older people were weeping because they thought this would never happen in their lifetime. And I remember thinking back at that time to 1960. I was 1 year old at that time, so I figuratively thinking back. But at that time, we were trying to elect the first Catholic president of the United States, John Kennedy, and there were people who were uncomfortable with that. And it took somebody to push forward and to say that, you know, I'm just as patriotic and American as you are, and I want what's best for this community just as you do, and I want to support your people and have you support my people, and we are all one. Ultimately, what is it? One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That's what we are. And it had taken breaking that down in that generation, and then breaking down that wall in this generation. And every time we break down walls in American society, we become stronger as a nation. We become stronger as a people, because we welcome in more groups who have their own talents, who have their own perspective, who bring their energy and their creativity and their ingenuity to bear in building our society. And when we do that, we get better as a people. And to have a tone in this country right now that we should categorize one another and find blame to shift onto some categories of people is so peculiarly un-American that it is deeply wrong. And we need to be a state that says we're going to set a different example. We're going to lift up everyone in our society. We're going to give everyone a chance and everyone an opportunity. And I will tell you where I find the leadership on this most of all. And it's with the younger generation of Americans and the younger generation of Ohioans. They are the least prejudiced and the least bigoted and the least stereotyping group of Americans I have ever seen. I'm talking about teenagers and people in their 20s and people in their 30s. And it is time that we shared the mantle of leadership with the younger generation, and we listened to them and lifted them up and embraced their values, which is that we all should help one another, look out for one another, and support one another, without regard to any of the things that could easily divide us, whether that's background or race or religion or anything that divides us. And if we welcome that younger generation into leadership in this country and this state, not 30 years from now, but now, we will be a better state. And we will push forward on the progressive values of inclusion and diversity and tolerance that I think we need in this state to be the strongest state we can be. And that's ultimately what we should want to be. And I will be a champion for this community as your governor. I have known you now for a long time, and I have seen what you have to offer. And Columbus more and more is embracing it, and the state of Ohio will embrace it. And we've also invited some of the leaders of the New Americans groups around Ohio to my house on Sunday, September 9th. Now, I don't want you all to come. I mean, I do, but we can't have all of you come on the afternoon to pay our respects and to make sure that people understand what sort of attitude and philosophy and outlook that we have for this state. And I will say something about Governor Kasich. I disagree with him on many issues, but I agree with him on many others. One of the things he did this summer was to create an office of opportunity for new Americans in the state government. That was a courageous move. It was a wise move. It was an appropriate move. I have said that I commend him for that, and we will build upon that when I am governor. And we will find ways to lift up the new Americans in Ohio and recognize that when we open up more opportunity, when we break down these walls, we will be the Ohio that we should be, that we can be, the Ohio and the America that we can be proud of. So thank you. Thank you for having me here tonight.
Thank you, Gordon. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. A lot of stuff stake on the state. I just want to open the floor, as well as the community. They have, questions. Hamza will have all questions.
Okay. All right. So we have some questions that were asked online. We're going to start off with those. Meanwhile, we're also going to pass around Post-it notes if you guys want to write on there. Also, if you just want to come up and ask the questions. Again, tonight is actually all about the discussion. This is a community discussion, so please, no matter how silly they are, I'm just kidding, please, no silly questions. Let's get the dialogue going. If you have a question, please don't hesitate to come up. With that being said, Ismail, if you want to start off. You know, Somali make a good win.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to switch back from English to Somali. Marka walaalayaal suu walaalkay Xamza yiri wax haduu jiro qof su'aala waxa hina flashcards baa hina oo meesha yaala oo ku qori kartaa hadii aragtina waa noo yeeri kartaa aniga mise Xamza mise Ahmed su'aasha waa ku turjubaani karnaa English waa ku weydiin karnaa bas xaq waa su'aalaha waa muhiim in la maqlo dadkana weydiis marka fadlan insha Allah gacanta taagtada inay su'aal qabtiin. So okay, so we had solicited some questions online on Facebook and on Twitter as well. So these questions were mostly in Somali, but I've translated them. So the first question is, how do you plan to tackle affordable housing?
That's a really great question, and I'll tell you why. I've been in a number of meetings. My children ask me what I do all day, and I say I go to a meeting, I go to a meeting, I go to a meeting. They say, boy, that sounds so boring. But every meeting is different, and it's on different subjects. But one thing I've heard about frequently at a number of different meetings of groups is the issue of affordable housing in Ohio and the lack of affordable housing that we have. I've heard it from realtors who are worried about the real estate market. I've heard it from bankers who worry about the financial markets that they're dealing with. I've heard it from social service advocates and people who are looking out for people who need housing that they can sustain. And there is, I believe, quite a bit more we can do in Ohio for affordable housing. We can leverage the Section 42 credits that come through the Ohio Housing Finance Agency. We can consider a state tax credit for affordable housing. We do not have that in Ohio right now, but a number of states do. And we need to think about the fact that it's getting harder and harder to build new homes, as I talk to home builders, for less than $200,000, $250,000 cost. That's not a starter home for people. And so I'm worried about that part of the market. And in terms of renting, rents are not very affordable in big parts of Columbus. Have you seen that recently? You often have young people living 3 and 4 to a space that's supposed to house 1 or 2 in order to try to make it affordable. And so having affordable housing, recognizing that we need to have some dedicated funding for that, and we need to have some dedicated places of affordable housing for people, and there should be a mix of this through the housing stock in Columbus, and especially downtown, which is getting very, very pricey, as many of you may know, is a really important thing for us, and I think the state government can be more helpful than it has been in the past.
Okay, great. I'm going to try to translate that in Somali, so bear with me. Walaalayaal marka su'aasha aan weydiiyey wuxuu ahaa maxaa ka qabtaa guryaasha oo especially guryaasha affordable-ka meaning guryaasha la deegi karo oo dadkeena anaga oo sa u badan nahay dad anaga cusub baan nahay Mareykanka waddankan dhawaan yimaaday waxaan nahay dadaalaya laakiin weli heerkeeni kor u kacin marka waxa ay dadka oo dhibaataysan oo weliba guryaasha qaaliga deegi karin gurina gadan karin maxaa loo qabanayaa sida guryo oo la kiraysan karo oo macquul loo helo marka jawaabtiisa wuxuu yiri waa run waaye guladii rentiga kor bay aad ugu socotaa aniga hadda inta Mareykan deganaa xitaa 16 sano deganaa isbedelka waa arkay kirada si cirka u sii gashay badan ma bixin karaan kirada guryaasha la dhisayna wuxuu yiri hadda guryo wax way 250 kun ugu yar marka qof hadda yimaaday kama jawaabi karo marka wuxuu yidhi waxa ugu fiican sameynaya waxaan siinaynaa tax credit qofka soo qaada hadduu lacag badan hayso dhaho guryaan dhisayaa canshuurtaa laga dhameeyaa soo guryo u dhiso rakiisa oo dadka ay degi karaan Soomaalida iyo dadka la mid ah oo guri qaali kiraysan karin guri gadan karin guri marka tax credit baa loo siinaya canshuurtaa laga yareynayaa sida loogu caawiyo looguna fududeeyo inay guryaasha soo kala dhisaan wuxuu yidhina waxa kale waxa waaye inaan funding raadinaa rabnaa oon ku caawino dadka sida loogu fududeeyo dadka guryaasha ay ku adag tahay inay kiraystaan u gataan mise u helaan u kiraystaan marka wax kale hadday su-aal jirto mise qof hadduu xitaa comment qabo su-aal khasab maaha inuu yahay soo istaagi karaa uu sheegan karaa xaaladiisa. Okay, so I guess no one has any other questions. I'll try to follow up with another question then. I'll just keep doing it until somebody hopefully comes up. So.
And if you're going to be gracious enough to translate my answers, I'll try to keep them a little shorter.
That would be helpful. Thank you. Okay, so the biggest question is in regards to healthcare. Medicaid expansion, as Burhan mentioned, is one of the key issues, especially for the new American community, especially with language liabilities and language difficulties. It's a lot harder for someone to navigate through this, complex healthcare system. So what, in your words, would you do to make it more accessible? And not only that, but to make it easier so that someone who wants to get affordable healthcare is able to get access to it in a quicker fashion?
Yeah. Understand that the Medicaid expansion and healthcare generally is a defining issue in this race. I have put out a plan that is for reducing healthcare costs and providing more reliable coverage to more Ohioans. And my opponent, Mike DeWine, has been against the Medicaid expansion from the start. He spent a number of years using the powers of his office to try to kill it in Ohio and across this country. And even when he lost in the US Supreme Court, he brought yet another lawsuit to try to kill it again. The Medicaid expansion is really important for Ohio. And again, I'll say here, Governor Kasich did a good thing when he brought the Medicaid expansion here and he had to go around our legislature to do it. And the legislature still wants to cut it off and restrict it and kill it if they can. And my opponent has now said sort of that he thinks he's for it, except that what he really wants to do is reduce the size of the program and reduce it and throw people off the rolls is the only way you're going to accomplish that. And that won't be good for us in Ohio, because having people have access to healthcare, to doctors, to medical services, means better health outcomes for people. And if they don't get it and they sit outside the healthcare system, they'll come into our emergency rooms later in life with more severe, more serious problems that are more costly, worse outcomes. We won't fail to treat them, but we will all end up paying for that uncompensated care and those worse outcomes. So you can save some money in the Medicaid program, but it'll come at the expense of healthcare overall in Ohio. We need to save the Medicaid expansion and we need it to be robust. And let me say too, that if you're somebody who, ends up being knocked off of the Medicaid, it sometimes takes several months to get back on. And it's a complicated process, and this is exactly what you're talking about. The more complicated it is, the harder it is for people to have that assured care, the more worries they have, the less peace of mind their entire families have, the more chance there is that they'll catch some sort of bad break, some sort of diagnosis of some serious problem. It happens to people all the time. We all know people who are diagnosed with something tomorrow they never knew they had yesterday. And to have secure, stable coverage is really important for people. And we will work to preserve it in the state of Ohio. And my running mate, Betty Sutton, and I have said that we will fight for this strongly and we'll stand up for healthcare of Ohioans. We will not let them take that away.
saa u turjubaano su-aasha aan weydiiyey wuxuu ahaa caafimaadka mise Medicaid Soomaaliya si u badan yihiin saa ula socotiin Medicaid bay qaataan oo caafimaadka si u badan yihiin oo waliba especially income-kooda meel gaarin wali heerkii loogu talagalay gaarin wuxuu qaataa caafimaadka Medicaid marka waxyaalayaasha waxa way aad waddankan dagaal weyn ka socday labada xisbi marka wuxuu yidhi anigu waa u dagaalamayaa saa Medicaid u ballaariyo una weyneeyo si dad badan ay ugu qalmaan caafimaad oo helaan wuxuu ninka iga soo horjeeda laakiin Mike DeWine baa dhahaa ninkaas magaciisa waa inaa baratiin ninka waxa way dagaal weyn ku haya inuu Medicaid baabi'iyo oo tirtiro marka wuxuu yidhi waa muhiim qofka inuu caafimaad fiican haysto sababta ay ku tahay qofka hadduu caafimaad haysanin oo laga yaaba isagoo xanuunsan isbitaal aadin uu dhaho lacag ma rabo inay saarmato oo lacag ma rabo inay charge gareeyo marka qofka uu sii xanuunsanayaa marka waa nasiib daro waddankan oo dunyada ugu qanisan inuu qof caafimaad ka fikirayo waa nasiib daro laakiin wuxuu yidhi haddaa governor ahay waxyaalayaasha ugu muhiimsan aan u dagaalamaya waxa waaye inaan ballaariyo expansionka Medicaid sa u ballaariyo si qof kasta ugu qalmo uga walwalina saa ula socotiin inta Canada marka la fiiriyo tusaale Canada waxay leeyihiin healthcare for all yani qof kasta caafimaad uu qalma Canada ma aha meel oo qofka uu ka walwalaya caafimaad waddankan laakiin waa ka walwalnaa marka wuxuu yidhi waa muhiimna ogaatiin inaan u dagaalamayo oo ballaarinayana sidoo qof caafimaad darro ay ugu dhicin marka wixii kale su-aal haya anytime waa soo istaagi kartiin.
Just let me follow up what Ismail, this governor said. So also on Medicaid expansion state can la baskareeyay case uu baskareeyay waagi control board no la food gareeyay wala baskareeyay become legislation uu noqday wala baskareeyay saawala socotaan hadii uu Mike Dwan yimaado expansion wuxuu ka noqonayaa as a door saawala socotaan wuxuu sameeyay washing gareeyay wuxuu rabaa inuu isticmaalo waxbaan ka bedelaa leeyahay reality waxay tahay dadku haday caafimaad lahaan ku dhacaan ama caafimaad ay lose gareeyaan saawala socotaan qofku waxay ku qasbaysaa inuu hadhow lacag iska bixin karin inuu galo saad wala socotaa hadda qofku waxa lagu isbedel gareeyaa adjustment for income adjustment lagu sameeyo aragtin Soomaa so entire waxay bedeli doonaan systemka oo ay ka sameeyeen I watched the Kentucky and Indiana was work requirement wax badan ay bedeli doonaan insha Allah taala so make sure ina ogaataan arrintan very critical waaye expansion ka especially minority communities especially across the board anybody is going to impact waana arrin aad khatar waa inaad la socotaan caafimaadka qofka duusa haysanin waxaa ku dhacaya inuu hadhow uu bixin kari waayo lacagtii oo hadhow bankruptcy uu galo ala socda reasonka waxaan loo sameeyay waxaa dadka masaakiinta inay bankruptcy ay galeen caafimaadkana waa most critical in this society ala socotaan marka please this issue is a very critical on my heart I know so many families I work this expansion I fought beginning the state is very critical this is something that we have to be realistically watching because as you see Dwayne is flipping he's changing the message he's trying to trick all of us. But the reality is they're going to put out a door. As you know, the affordable ACAs is a risk right now, you see? So I want to make sure you guys have followed this issue. It's very critical for us, our community. Thank you. Anybody has questions?
And again, it's really important that healthcare be steady and dependable for families. Because if you're on it and then you're off it, you're on it and then you're off it, again, you just don't know what your coverage is. There's no peace of mind there, and again, you catch a bad break at the wrong time, suddenly your family is ruined. That's no good.
Governor, my name is Muhammad Ali. I'm the voice of the community. My question is, in the past decade, candidates will come to our community and will ask for votes, and they took it for granted. So my question to you is, what different approach will you take? su-aasheeda aan weydiiyey governorka noqon doono waxay tahay dadadka oo codadkeena u baahan communitygeena waa iska imaadaan annagoo nala tashanin waa iskaga codeynaa marka su-aashaa weydiiyey waxay tahay sababtaa kuugu codeyneen oo kuwii aa uga duwan tahay maxay tahay and the next question is that's all. Thank you.
So I have been coming to spend time with this community for a long time, and whether I was seeking election or not seeking election, because I wanted to build those bridges and build those ties. And I wanted to understand the community and how we could be helpful to the community. So that's my background and my record. But understand one thing. Think about which candidates are coming to see you and which are not. We've had 2 different candidate forums involving the Council of American Islamic Relations this year, one in the primary, one in the general election. And both times, all the candidates were invited, both Democrat and Republican. And none of the Republican candidates came. It was true in the spring. It was true again just recently when we had a candidate forum involving myself. Mike DeWine would not come, would not send anyone. They don't want to be seen with members of communities that will upset their political base, the Donald Trump base. They don't want to be seen. They will not even come and speak to you. What does that tell you about how they would lead Ohio? It tells me that they don't deserve to lead Ohio, and they don't deserve our support. And we need to make sure the state goes in a different direction, a direction where we will have leadership that represents and respects and understands and appreciates this community and other communities around Ohio.
saa u socotaan wuxuu gobolka suu ma sheegalay su-aasha uga jawaabay waxay ahayd oo runtii ahayd in macnaha qof markii ugu hor imaan meeshaan dhowr maraan u imaan jiray community ku dhex jiray waan kusoo laalaaban jiray saa ula socotaan wuxuu ka hadloo kale care oo islamic advocacy ah laba mar in lasoo casumay dadkii macnaha candidateska ahaa inaysan imaanin uu ka mid yahay Pt1 for example markii loo invitation loo diro labadii marba waan jooga anigu muusan imaanin taas waxay ku tusinaysaa dadka macnaha inaysan qofka aynii imaanaynin iyo qofka inii imaanayo inay kala fiican tahay arkaysaan qofku gurigaada kugu yimid wax ku weydiisto iyo qof aan rabo waxna ku weydiisanin oo rabo mataqaanaa maba kugu tashaninba ma garanaysaan macnaheedu waxaa waaye way kala fiican tahay uu yidhi laba mara loo wacay labada marba keer markii loo wacay maysan imaanin wuuna gooyey marka saas la adligeed macnaheedu waxaa waaye anigu community aan ka mid ahay waan soo laabtaa codkiina haddaa isiisaan wax badan ka qaban doonaa insha allahu tacaala
السلام عليكم. السلام عليكم. magacaygu waa xasan cumar waxaan ka mid ahay bulshada soomaalida ee degan Columbus Ohio ilaa laga soo bilaabo 2005 ilaa maanta marka su-aasheedu waxaa weeye madaxweynaheena maanta waan aragnaa dabcadiisa iyo sida uu u dhaqmayo maalin kasta daqiiqad kasta every minute been after been marka su-aasheedu waxaa weeye xisbiga dimuqraadiga dadaalkooda ma yara doorashadan maadaama ay sidaa tahay haddii haddana raashiyaanka ay lugta la soo galaan oo uu ninkaan haddana weyn gareeyo xaaladda maxay noqonaysaa
You got that, Rich? You guys probably heard Russia in there somewhere. I'm sure someone picked up on that, okay? Burhan got it. He's way better Somali than me.
I just make sure Hassan, he says, my name is Hassan, I'm part of the community. His question was, we see the presence every minute, things, how is it changing? How is it flipping things? His behavior. And we know the Democratic Party is doing an amazing job in terms of, the issues that is happening. So I want to make sure that, we have the president that really tweeting every minute, every seconds. And when you tweet, it hurts everybody, So he said the Democratic Party, they put a lot of effort for this election, and we want to make sure that, they continue to do. Another question, also somebody asked, which was all Democratic Party is putting their almost efforts for the election on 2011, November 6, 18. But what will happen if Russian meddles again? This is a very critical question. What about if they steal our votes? What kind of security do we have if it happened and we know it's happening? Do you have any thoughts for this question?
I don't think it's at all likely that the votes that people cast, whether by mail or in person, early or on the day of the election, are not going to be counted fairly and completely in Ohio. I really do not think that is a problem. What I do think is a problem is that there are efforts made to pollute the information that is given to voters and what's out there on the internet. There's plenty of bogus sites and there's lots of information that swims around, and there are a lot of dark money elements who are doing things in these elections to try to poison the information and terrible ads and terrible Facebook messages and other things. So I would say be careful about the information that's going around out there on the internet. Rely on the people you trust, the people you know to be informed and to know the people who know the candidates, who have seen their records up close. Rely on those people and the trusted sources of information that you have in your life, in your family, in your friends, in your community. Rely on one another. Listen to one another. That I think is really important because there's lots of sources of news or information out there. And and there's truth and there's falsity. There really is. There's truth and there's falsehood. And we will see that in these campaigns. But again, a lot of things will be said by a lot of people, and some of them will be credible and some of them won't. Rely on the people that you know and trust the most, and speak to them and have them speak to others. And that's the way that we can carry through this. And then ultimately, I have no doubt that our votes will be counted. And if this community brings out an enormous vote, it will change Ohio for the better.